Good evening, everybody, or whatever your time zone may be. This your girl Tiffany here, live in effect. Tonight's conversation, I'm going to be talking about the Olympics and Angola, Brazil, and Congo, and how they are connected. All right, we're going to have to go into the history of that. So, let me go ahead and start off talking about the Olympics. You know, the Olympics still going today. I don't know how long it's going to keep going. So it's been a long time since I watched it. I haven't watched the Olympics since I was a little girl. And I seen something that made me decide to do this subject. So Angola and Brazil had the women's soccer game going on, right? And what I saw, that was a form of sportsmanship, but it also shows the connection, the relationship between those from Angola and Brazil, right? So one of the players from the Angola team got injured. She injured her leg. I guess she messed her ACL up or something. And so there was two people out there that was struggling trying to get her off the field. So one of the girls from the other team, which they was playing against Brazil, right? One of the girls from the Brazil team came through and said, "Here, I got her. Like basically, I got her. I'll take care of her." She scooped her up, took her over there to the bench so she can get checked out by one of the doctors. So I said, well, you know what? That is great sportsmanship, but there is a relationship there. It's deeper than that. So what I got out of the whole thing was, let me pick my sister up. Let me carry my sister. She's not too heavy for me to pick up. I'll make sure that she get to the bench safely. That's what I picked up on that whole thing. It was a beautiful sportsmanship to the point that I decided that I wanted to do this topic on the relationship. Now, for those of you that won't sit up here and make an argument, well, what they got to do with us, this thing, other, they're part of the African transatlantic slave trade, okay? They are the Africans. All right, the people from Brazil are in the African diaspora. Angola and Congo is in Central Africa. So if you really study history, you're gonna see the relationship because our ancestors also came up out of these regions of Angola and Congo as well, and they were brought here to America, especially in the southern region of America, like South Carolina, Louisiana. If you actually study the history, all right. So let's get on into the topic, all right. And also, as far as Congo goes, there was one of the there was one individual, right? A boxer. She was from the Congo area, and they had a picture of her after she lost her fight. She had her hand over her mouth and she was doing this. That was a message because what's going on right now in the Democratic of Congo, there's a lot of innocent people being slaughtered over there. And so she was trying to send a message to let people know that this is what's taking place in her country and not is not getting a lot of media attention. So that in itself was heartbreaking. Now let's go ahead and let's get into the history. So let's talk about Angola and Brazil relationship. Let's see. I'm going to go to the source right here from Jaster.org. And Jaster stands for Journal Storage. Okay. This is a very reliable source. So I recommend you guys check out this source. Go on this website if you want to look up for information regarding to history, etc. So this comes from the International Journal of African Historical Studies, which came out in 2013, volume 46, number 1. It says the Atlantic slave trade from Angola, a port-by-port estimate of slave embarks from 1701 to 1867, right? By Daniel B. Dominguez de Silva. So Angola served as the principal source of slaves for the Americas in the 18th and 19th centuries. These slaves embarked from ports controlled by the Portuguese, who had established a strong presence in West Central Africa the 16th century, and from ports dominated by African Pilates? Yeah. Located mostly north of Luanda, capital of Portuguese colony in Angola. So estimates of the numbers of slaves leaving the region usually focus on two principal Portuguese ports of embarkation, Luanda and Benguela. These estimates rarely provide information on the numbers of slaves leaving African-controlled ports such as Cabinda, Malimbo, and the Congo River. All right. So it goes down to say the first estimate of slaves leaving Angola were based on Portuguese records of captives embarked from Luanda and Benguela, excuse me for the mispronunciation. So in 1944, Edmundo Correa Lopez estimated the number of slaves leaving Angola based on travelers' accounts. The slave trade contracts issued by the Portuguese government, which specified the number of captives that the contractor was supposed to deliver annually from Angola to Brazil, the tax revenue collected from slaves embarked from Luanda and Benguela, reports of Portuguese colonial officials stationed at these ports for the years of 1804 to 1820, 1823 to 1825, 1828 to 1829, and 1833 on statistics of illegal slave trades for the years of 1840 and 1847 compiled by the British naval officers, published in Brazilian periodicals of the 19th centuries. All right. Now, it says in 1949, Mauricio Golart used several of these documents to generate his own estimates of slaves disembarked in Brazil from Angola. Additionally, right, he used two lists of slaves embarked from Luanda and Benguela that he found in the Brazilian National Library in Rio de Janeiro. These lists provide an annual breakdown of slaves embarked by age categories for the years of 1734 to 1800 for Luanda and 1758 to 1800 for Benguela. In 1969, Philip Curtin used Gollart's number to generate his well-known census of the transatlantic slave trade. However, Curtin supplemented Goulart figures on the Portuguese slave trade with data on the British and French slaving activities in Angola, providing thereby the first comprehensive estimates of slaves carried from the coast of West Central Africa. Right? So, now, with that being said, the relationship shows that there were a lot of slaves, okay, that came from the Angola region, and later they came from the Congo region and were brought to Brazil. All right. So Brazil has a very strong African population. A very strong African population. Okay. So more Africans were sent over to Brazil in the Caribbean and Latin America than they were brought over here to United States of America. Okay, so it was only about, I think, around 10% of slaves that were brought here to America, and the rest of them came directly from the Caribbean and Latin America area, which they were brought here to this country. Okay, but with that being said, Brazil has a very strong African population, and their culture, when it comes to the African practices, center around the Angola and Congolese culture. All right, because it was a lot of those slaves that came from those regions. And what they had with them, they brought the African spirituality, they brought their languages, they brought all of that. And then you had tribes that were, for example, you had the tribes like the Congo people, right? All right, the Congo people were one of the tribes that was over there in Brazil. Now, Brazil, their official language is Portuguese, okay, because the Portuguese occupied that area. All right. And every other part of South America was occupied by the Spanish people. So to show you that the Africans in Brazil have a strong tie with those in Angola. Okay, they have a strong connection, a strong relationship, and history tells it itself. So when I saw what I saw with the Olympics, and I saw the sportsmanship, I saw that connection. I saw that relationship between someone from Angola and someone from Brazil, whether they know it or not. But that's what I saw, and that's what I was looking at. So yeah, they take on a lot of Angolan practice in Brazil. So you will find that there's a strong African descendant population. As a matter of fact, Portuguese, right? The Portuguese and the Spanish were one of the first Europeans to go to Africa and start the transatlantic slave trade. Then everybody else followed along. The French, the British, the Dutch, okay? They came along later. But it was the Spanish and the Portuguese that went over there. It was the Spanish and Portuguese that went over there, because if you look at the map, right, you'll see there's Africa. Africa's right here, right? And if you look above Africa, you will see Europe, right? And right over there by Europe, you will see Portugal and Spain, because Portugal and Spain is right next to each other. All right. And Portugal and Spain was very close to Africa, especially to the northwestern part of Africa, down to the western region. It's very close. It's in that proximity. So it wasn't too far for them to come from the area in Europe all the way on down to Northwest, down to West Africa, to Central Africa. Okay. Hey, how you doing, Phillips? I appreciate you coming through, brother. Let me see. Mr. Norman put Dr. Gerald Horn has Angolan roots according to his sister's research. That's very interesting. That's interesting to know. I mean, it's a lot of us that carry the Angolan and Congo roots without even knowing that, right? We just don't carry a whole lot compared to our Nigerian roots, right? But we do carry those Angolan and Congo roots. And you know that, and you know it's a fact, especially if you're in the southern region of the United States. You spelled his name correctly. Yeah, his name is, you spelled his name correctly. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's that's a very interesting information you put out there. As a matter of fact, I recommend people to check out Dr. Gerald Horn. He does a good job. He does a great job. dealing with African history, African diaspora history, I think people should go ahead and check him out on YouTube. Yep. I didn't know that about Mike Tyson. I didn't know that at all. I didn't know Mike Tyson had Congo in him. Mm. Thank you for sharing that information. All right, so now let's go to the next source and see what we can find. Let's see. All right, so now I'm on this website called slaveryandremembrance.org. Salvador da Bahia, Brazil. So the Portuguese explorers first landed in northeast Brazil in 1500 in this region called Bahia. They found large indigenous population with whom they traded some local commodities like wood which was used to make dye. Facing competition from other European nations in the early to mid 16th century, Portugal began to invest in Brazil as a source of export commodities and imperial wealth. Since Brazil did not appear to have supplies of gold or silver, the Portuguese imported the technology of sugar production to Bahia from their Atlantic islands. All right, Madeira and Sao Tome, for example. Okay, where the crop had proved successful. This move in the mid 1500s launched plantation, Brazilian agriculture, and large-scale slave importation. By 1600, Brazil was the largest exporter of sugar to Europe. All right. Then it goes on to say planters in Bahia first enslaved indigenous people to work the sugar plantation, but steadily shifted their labor force to one composed primarily of Africans. Brazil continued to import Africans both legally and illegally well into the 19th century before officially ending slavery in 1888. During this long span, Brazil received captive Africans from every part of the continent, landing almost 5 million people in total. Bahia alone imported in excess of 1,300 men, women, and children. I mean, excuse me, not 1,000, 1,300,000 men, women, and children. While the areas of African importation shifted over time, more than 90% of Africans who arrived in Bahia came from either the Bight of Benin or Central Africa. And it says, because of these strong connection between two continents, it was possible for Africans and their descendants in Bahia to preserve a variety of African social and cultural forms. Africans in Bahia built religious institutions and social hierarchies, for instance, modeled on those from their African homes. One example of this comes from the experiences of enslaved Muslims in the 19th century. Beginning in the early 1800s, Bahia received increasing numbers of enslaved Muslims, and Islamic population of Bahia underwent a period of expansion into 1830s. So Muslim community leaders in and around Salvador established schools almost identical to those in West Africa, where students could learn about Islam and become literate in Arabic. In 1835, about 500 enslaved and free Muslims launched a large, though ultimately unsuccessful, rebellion in Bahia. Wow. Now, let's go over here to where it says Central Africa. Watch this. Central Africa is the part of Africa's Atlantic coast encompassing the modern nation of Gabon, Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Angola. Through much of the transatlantic slave trade era, merchants and planters identified the region and its captives as, its captives Africans as Angola and Angolians. Because of its internal geography, location relative to the Americas, and large catchment zone, West Central Africa was the largest supplier of enslaved Africans to the New World. In total, the slave traders carried well over 5 million Africans from Central African ports. Central Africa differs from other regions that supply the transatlantic slave trade. For example, Central Africa was home to some relatively large and powerful political states that control significant population and territories. In addition, the peoples who inhabited the region share broadly similar culture, language, religion, all of which facilitate large scale organization, warfare, and trade. And this is coming from the website of slaveryandremembrance.org. All right. Now, let's go to right. Let's go to the part that says because of internal geography, location relative to the Americas, right, and large catchment zone. All right. And then the part that says in total, slave traders carried well over 5 million Africans from Central African ports. So that means that in the beginning, most of the slaves, right, came up out of Central Africa more than they came up out of West Africa in the beginnings. All right? Because remember, when the Portuguese and Spain came over, right, they were more interested in Central Africa than they were of West Africa. They were more interested in the Congo and Angola area. So that's where they got majority of their slaves from. Okay? Then when everybody else came, they mainly went to West Africa and some parts of Central Africa, but like the British, the French, they went over to West Africa because that's where it was at for them, mostly in that region. But for the Portuguese and the Spanish, it was mostly Central Africa. And they had over 5 million slaves they brought with them, okay? And sent them over to South America in those areas. So today, in Brazil, I think Brazil has over, I would say, probably more than 50% of African population. If not, I think it's around like 50% of African population over in Brazil. Again, it's a very strong, they have a strong population of African people, a very strong population of African people in that country, in South America, period. But especially in Brazil. All right. Now let's see what else I can find for you guys. Angola Brazil relation. Uh-oh. Let's see if I can find something on here. Let's see if I can. All right, let's look over here. So it talks about the period of the transatlantic slave trade, right? Both Angola and Brazil was once united for 300 years as part of the Portuguese Empire. In 1646, Jesuit priest Gonçalo Giallo was it succinctly stated the importance of the economic relationship, keyword economic relationship, okay, between Brazil and Angola, as without Angola there is no Brazil. Keyword what it says, without Angola there is no Brazil, because the Angola population is what made Brazil what it is today. All right. It says Angola was a major source of slaves to Brazil. Angola was a major source of slaves to Brazil, which was out of the several European colonies in the Americas, the largest single importer of slaves during the transatlantic slave trade. 2/3 of those slaves in Brazil originated from the Angola Congo region. Rio de Janeiro depended on the consistent influx of slaves from Angola to work on sugar cane plantation and for re-exploitation to Buenos Aires in exchange for silver, right? So during the Dutch occupation of Angola in 17th century, Brazil and Portugal acted as a co-colonizer together in their efforts to reclaim the territory. Brazilian historian Luis Felipe de Ela Castro suggests that this critical historical period cemented Brazil's connection to Angola for the duration of the slave trade. That the construction of Brazil occurred vez a vez the destruction of Angola's indigenous kingdoms. Mm. So after the fleeing of Salvador de Sa successfully expelled the Dutch from Angola in 1648, Angola was essentially under Brazilian rule, thereby ensuring the continuity of slavery in Brazil for more than 2 centuries, right? Salvador de Sá similarly understood Brazil's economic dependence on Angola and its consequential importance to Portugal, and is quoted as saying that without the stronghold Angola, Brazil cannot survive, nor can Portugal survive without Brazil. So, in other words, Brazil had to rely on Africa, right, Angola, for the resources in order for Portugal to be able to build its economics. So I'm going back to show you this. I'm telling you this to say this, that the European countries, right, those powerful European countries like Portugal, Spain, England, France, they would not be where they are today if it wasn't for the transatlantic slave trade. They would not be the most powerful country. Even United States would not even be the most powerful countries if it wasn't for the slave trade. So the slave trade was about the economic commodity. That's what it was all about. It was about economics. It was about building up these countries, right? Building up the wealth, because these countries couldn't do it on their own. So they had to go to other places, right? They went to foreign places, other continents, to rely on natural resources, to rely on the people, to not only they gather up those natural resources, right, and bring them into these new worlds or areas they occupied or colonized, right? But they had to bring the people, because the main reason why African people were brought into these land like Americas and the Caribbean was through cheap labor. It was cheaper to get Africans. You didn't have to pay that much money. Okay, it was about cheap labor. And with that cheap labor, you saved a whole lot of money, right? As a European nation, you was able to save a lot of money, and you was able to gain more profit, right? Because when you see a place like Africa and parts of Africa that has a lot of natural resources, that's money, that's wealth. That's what they cared about, was the wealth. They wanted to build up their nation. So again, without the transatlantic slave trade, according to the article, the European nation would not be where they are today. The European nation would not be where they are today. They wouldn't be so powerful. They wouldn't have all this wealth. The brother put, and don't forget Cape Verde too. A lot of Verdeans in Brazil. Oh, okay. You know what? You're right. Let's not forget about them either. Let's not forget. Without the Africans, Without the blood, sweat, and tears of these Africans, Europe would not be where it's at today. Those main European countries, they wouldn't be where they at today. Now let's get back to the article. Let's get back to the article. Hold on, let me try to pull this back over. All right, now it goes on to say from 1815 to 1822, Angola was administered by Brazil during the transfer of the Portuguese court to Brazil. Economic relations between Angola and Portugal had never been as strong as that of Brazil and Angola, and Portuguese influence was minimal in the early 19th century, having been usurped by Brazilian control of the slave trade, right? So the children of the Angolan elites were often sent to be educated in Rio de Janeiro as opposed to Lesbian, right? So after Brazilian independence in 1822, there was a desire among some community in Luanda and Benguela to also declare independence from Portugal and form a confederacy with Brazil. These plans ultimately failed due to diplomatic pressure from Great Britain, who did not want to see the creation of a new South Atlantic empire, and stronger political lobbying on parts of Angolans who were aligned with Lesbian. In addition, one of the stipulations of Brazil independence from Portugal was clause that Brazil would promise not to accept direct control over any Luso-African territories. And then when we go down here, where it says Angolan independence and post-independence relation. So in November of 1975, Brazil became the first country to recognize and establish a diplomatic relation with the newly independent Angola. Soon afterwards, Angola descended into a civil war which lasted until 2002. This is recently. So in July of 2002, Angolan President Jose Eduardo dos Santos paid a visit to Brazil to attend the fourth CPLP summit in Brasilia, right? In 2003, Brazilian President I'm not even going to say all that, Luis Silvia paid an official visit to Angola. There would be several high levels visits between leaders of both nations. And then it said the Angola-Brazil relationship benefits from the presence of a significant number of Brazilian workers, self-employed professionals, and entrepreneurs who work, live, and contribute to Angola's economy. In the defense area, Brazil participates in a military exercise alongside Angola, either within the scope of the CPLP or in the context of Obangan Express operation on simulations to combat illicit activity in the Gulf of Guinea. In addition, each year the Brazilian army has deployed officers to collaborate in matters of instruction with their Angolan counterparts, including in a project to create a training center for peace operation along the lines of an existing counterpart in Brazil. So in November 2015, both nations celebrated 40 years of diplomatic relation. In January 2019, Angolan Foreign Minister Manuel Domingos Augusto paid a visit to Brazil to attend the inauguration of President Jair Bolsonaro. In December of 2019, Brazil Foreign Minister Ernesto Araujo paid an official visit to Angola and met with President Aho Lauricio. All right. So that's that information. Now you see, to this day, they still have that relationship. But again, the relationship would not have started if it wasn't for the transatlantic slave trade. Now let's look up what CPLP stands for. CPLP stand for the Community of Portuguese Language Countries, right? Now, so the Community of Portuguese Language Country is an international organization and political association of Lusophone nations across 5 continents where Portuguese is an official language. The CPLP operates as a privileged multilateral forum for the mutual cooperation of the government's economics, non-governmental organization, and people of Lusophonia. The CPLP consists of 9 member states and 33 associate observers located in Europe, South America, Asia, Africa, and Oceania, totaling 38 countries and 4 organizations. All right. So if you guys don't know, the official language over in Congo, right, and in Angola is Portuguese. So they speak Portuguese over there in their countries, in those 2 areas. All right. But so yeah, that goes back to what I was stating earlier. The relationship between Angola, Brazil, and Congo is basically the transatlantic slave trade. That is the relationship. Now, let me get back to what I was mentioning about the sister, the bossa, who lost her match, right? When she was sending a message by putting her finger over her mouth and putting the middle finger and the index finger at her temple. That was an indication, that was a message to say what was going on in the Congo area. As a matter of fact, let me pull up that article for you. Let me go ahead and pull the article up for y'all. Let's see, what's her name? Congolese Bossa Olympics. Okay, I think that's her name. Let me put it up in the news. I'm trying to. Amilcar Cabral, one of the world's greatest thinkers, was born in Cape Verde. Oh yes, yes, and I don't think I did a topic on him yet. I probably did, but if not, I want to do a topic on him one day. And for those of you that don't know, this month of August is Black August month, which celebrates the lives of the political activists who became political prisoners, right? And also looking back at the looking back at the life of George Jackson, right, who's locked up at St. Quentin, California, who died in around 1973, I believe. Yeah, when he was trying to escape. And he took out one of the guards. Then the other guards ended up taking him out. So after his death, Black August became a commemoration to honor those political prisoners. But you know what's so funny? Well, no, I wouldn't say it's funny. What's so interesting is I happen to be born on August. I happen to be born on August, and I share the same birthday as Fred Hampton, who was a Black Panther. So I share the same birthday as him, and I was born on August. And I happen to be born 8 days after Huey P. Newton was found dead. Because Huey Newton was dead, he died on August 22nd of 1989. I happen to be born 8 days after. And like I said, I share the same birthday as Fred Hampton. And this is Black August. So it's a coincidence. It's a coincidence. But okay, come on, man. What the hell? I don't need to see all this. Okay, okay. I don't need to see all this crap. Oh, shit. Oh, hold on, you guys. I'm trying to pull up this information. All right, so finally, I got it. All right, so according to the information, right, on X, it says ESPN Africa. It said despite feeling overwhelmed with emotion after her Olympics defeat, Congolese boxer Marcelet Shakobe made a powerful gesture by placing her hand in front of her mouth and pointing two fingers at her temple, raising awareness for the violence happening in DR Congo. The gesture is to signify that people are being killed in the country, but that no one is speaking out to stop it. Now you see his sister right here? And that's a deep message right there. That's a deep one. You know, one day I have to really focus on the topic of how the transatlantic slave trade affected African people. I'm talking about the Africans in the continent. Because people have this misconception or preconceived notion that those in the African continent was not affected by the transatlantic slave trade, which is not true, which is very false. There were families that cried out for their loved ones. So it did have a greater impact on those Africans in the continent, whether you know it or not. So that will be my primary focus on my next topic. If not, then I could do that topic later on down the future. But yes, the transatlantic slave trade not only affected Black people in America or in other parts of the diaspora, but it also affected those in the African continent as well. It did. But anyways, you guys, that's all I have for tonight. I thank you all for watching. And I thank you for subscribing to the channel. So make sure you also like and share and check out my previous videos. Shout out to everybody in the comment section, Brother Norman, Philip, and MJA2873. Thank you all for tuning in. And for those of you that are just coming in, you have to watch the video from the very beginning. Until next time, peace and power elevation be to all of you. And be safe. And I will connect with you all again. All right.